Both. This is a hearing that just wrapped up moments ago, and major developments coming out of Massachusetts in the Brian Walshe case. Defense attorneys for Walshe are seeking records from state troopers connected to the Karen Read case who are currently under internal investigation, including Trooper Michael Proctor, Brian Tully, and Yuri Buchanan. Walshe is accused of killing his wife, Anna Walshe, dismembering her body and disposing of her remains. Since his arrest back in 2023, lead investigator Trooper Michael Proctor has been suspended. Here's part of those major arguments made earlier today.
And the reason I bring that up is because the Commonwealth now has stood up and they've said this before, they're not going to call Proctor. The point is that the defendant has a right to show that the investigation has flaws in it. And what we're hearing from the government is they don't want to call Proctor, the case officer. It's not because he didn't do important things. It's because Proctor, along with the other troopers he worked with, seemed to be engaged, at least in the Read case, but they're engaged in this type of professional misconduct that they got investigated for.
Okay, so the judge says that she needs more information that is suggesting Trooper Proctor showed any bias towards Walshe during his murder investigation before she makes any sort of a ruling. Take a listen.
Proctor and some of his colleagues have already specifically shown they are biased against defendants. To make an argument that they were only ever biased against Karen Read is not logical. It's just not logical. And so I think that...
So are they biased is your argument they're biased as to all defendants?
I'm saying they're biased...
That they ultimately become a target of their investigation?
They're biased against Mr. Walshe.
So the judge says that she is, quote, focused like a laser in getting that information before granting the release of any internal investigation, which falls under Rule 17 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Michael, Ashley?
Yeah, Matt, a very important ruling in that case. However, she has not made it yet. So what's next in this case?
All right, so a trial date has been set for October of this year. We know that there is a lot of evidence in this case yet to be tested, including blood, tissue, and bone fragments. The Commonwealth wants those tested at a private lab. Walshe is facing a number of serious charges right now, including murder, obstruction, and illegal transfer of human remains. He faces up to life behind bars if convicted.
Whew, this case, something else. Thank you, Matt, for all those great updates. And let's bring in our guest for that, our trial attorney, Robert Hilla, who's still with us. Robert, tell me your initial thoughts on this case, knowing the charges, but yet hearing there's so much evidence that still needs to be tested.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, a missing body, you know, the guilt or innocence of the defendant, that's all going to have to be proven here with circumstantial evidence, which is just as good as direct evidence in the eyes of the court. So because of that, though, I think the defense is trying to look at the officer misconduct as tainting all the evidence and wants to try and create a case that way. That's why pretrial is so important, because that's really going to be where the presentation of the case is going to be created for both.
Now, Robert, the fly in the ointment here is this Michael Proctor guy. We know his background from the Read case. I mean, it was just so egregious. And he's actually got a trial, I believe, coming up next week on that misconduct. So he's a guy that's got some trouble. We've seen this before, Michael, and you're in New York. It happens in New York quite frequently, where a particular officer or an office is shown to have misconduct. And now defense attorneys, they come down and we want to open up all these cases or anything that was connected to that officer or to that particular office. The judge wants to limit it in this case. What do you make of that aspect of the case?
Well, the judge can only focus on this case before it, okay? In a lot of those other cases, you have other people who are looking to reopen a whole bunch of cases, but on behalf of the individuals that were subject to what they're claiming is misconduct. So in the first case, the court has to decide, was there officer misconduct with respect to this defendant and what's alleged here? Secondly, does that misconduct relate in any way to the evidence, or tainted, where the court needs to step in and do something to make sure that doesn't happen to the jury on this. So those are, I think, the two main things that the court has to look at.
Yeah. Now, Judge, what's interesting about this is that the judge wants more information about how it's relevant to this particular case. And I've always felt, because I was involved in a couple of cases like this, that unless you have access to the records, it's hard to find out if there's information that can help you in your case.
And I think that's the problem. You're right. And that's part of that double-edged sword, because you can't just say, well, but he did it in these cases. Certainly he did it in mine. That's not good enough, I don't think.
Not enough. All right, we'll take a break here, folks. Coming up, we're going to take you into court in Massachusetts for that motions hearing for Brian Walshe. So keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
We are in Massachusetts this hour, where a man accused of killing his missing wife is back in court today for a motions hearing.
Brian Walshe is charged with first-degree murder in the presumed death of his wife, Anna. She was last seen on January 1st of 2023, having dinner with her husband and a friend.
Investigators say that Brian killed Anna that night and spent the following days concealing the crime, including making a fake ransom note. Anna's body has never been found.
Before we get you into court, here's Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson with more on the case against Brian Walshe.
No comment from Brian Walshe after he was charged with the murder of his wife, Anna Walshe, the missing Massachusetts mother of 3 young boys. And while he's not talking, prosecutors are piecing together a timeline of what they say he was doing in the days after her disappearance. Prosecutors say that Anna Walshe was last seen here at her Cohasset home on New Year's Day. Anna was last seen at home between 4 and 5 a.m. by a family member. Walshe told police that he had slept in that morning, but prosecutors say that he was actually awake and searching disturbing topics on his son's iPad.
At 4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell.
The very next day, more Google searches.
There were also more Google searches on January 2nd. At 12:45 p.m., hacksaw best tool to dismember. At 1:10 p.m., can he be charged with murder without a body? At 1:14 p.m., can you identify a body with broken teeth?
Prosecutors say that on January 2nd, Walshe came here to this Home Depot store, located in Rockland, Massachusetts, 9 miles from his house. He spent $450 on cleaning supplies.
Items included cleaning products, mops, brushes.
On January 3rd, prosecutors say Walshe drove to an apartment complex in Abington, 16 miles from his home, where they say surveillance video shows him hoisting a heavy garbage bag into a dumpster. At 4:48 p.m., prosecutors say Walshe drove to a second apartment complex in Abington. And at 5:10 p.m., investigators say he threw items away into a dumpster in Brockton. Then on January 6th and 7th, police searched the Walshe property in Cohasset. Prosecutors collected a lot of evidence in the basement of this home, including DNA blood evidence and 2 knives. On January 8th, Walshe was arrested for misleading police in his wife's missing person investigation. The next day, he was arraigned and pled not guilty. Then on January 17th, prosecutors announced that he would be charged with her murder. The next day, he was back in court.
The defendant is now before the court charged with murder of his wife, Anna Walshe, as well as disinterring of a body.
Let's go into court now for the start of that motions hearing for Brian Walshe.
On the exhaustive DNA testing. And so I'll hear from defense whether you're prepared to go forward on that based on whether you've had a chance to read it and whether it seems to me on my quick read of it during the break that it answers some of the questions that I had when I read your motion, but it doesn't resolve some of the issues. But as an initial matter, Attorney Tipton, are you prepared to go forward on that today?
We're not, and we talked to the district attorney about that just now.
Okay. And I may, even though I'm not going to hear from you on that, I may at a later point in the hearing share with you some of my thoughts as I was going through it, because my thoughts now are probably going to be perhaps similar to my thoughts when we actually resolve that issue, but there's certain questions that linger in my mind based on my, again, quick read of what I saw between in the opposition. So really, then what we're going to focus our attention on is these requests. I don't have the number because I didn't have a chance to go back on the docket, but whatever the docket number is, you know what it is. Under Rule 17 and under Wayness, I guess it looks like it's paper number 29. I take it back that I didn't know what it is. It's paper number 29. What I don't know is what the clerk's office assigned as part of a number for the Commonwealth's partial opposition. And so we'll deal with that now. Let me say, as a matter of preliminary, so that we're all on the same page, I see sort of these internal affairs requests as you got to meet all the requirements of 17A2, and then on top of it, you have this special little nugget of information or special treatment of files from such entities as the MSP internal affairs folks. And just so that we're on the same page with regard to how I see this analysis, it seems to me, and under the text of Wayness, that the defense has the burden of showing, and I quote from the case, that there is a specific good faith reason for believing that the information is relevant to a material issue in the criminal proceedings and could be of real benefit to the defense. Based on that, a defendant that's moving for such records, as you are in this case, must show, first, that you have a basis, your basis of believing that the information is relevant material is specific and it is in good faith. And second, that the records will contain evidence that is relevant to a material issue and could be of real benefit to the defendant. As I read the papers, both the motion and the opposition, I have many questions swirling in my head, which I'm going to ask you to answer today so that I can make a determination under Wayness whether the defendant has met his burden with regard to the records that he seeks. So here's my questioning of you, and I'll start, I suppose, first with Attorney Tipton, and we're going to go back and forth because I have some questions for the Commonwealth as well. But as an initial matter, you have indicated that you are seeking records that relate to Troopers Proctor, Buchanan, Tully, DeChico, Kotkowski, and more. And I want to know very simply as to each of those individuals, what role do you believe they played in this investigation? So start with whoever you like.
It's a very fair question, and I'll try to answer it succinctly. Proctor was initially what I term as the lead investigator in the case. He was involved in a variety of significant events in this case, both initially and later on, including being present for witness interviews, collection of evidence, assessment of evidence. From my reading of the, I think now about 260 pages of state police reports, I believe that he signed off on a number of other reports, which means he was supervising other members of the Mass State Police investigation team that was assigned to investigate this case. He's an integral part. He was just, for lack of a better word, he was the major player at the outset of this particular case. As for Moore, I will basically say that my reading of the reports in the grand jury, it looks to me like Moore his tasks were limited to and I might be missing something, but I think his tasks were limited to going out and collecting surveillance tapes from private individuals that might have recorded particular events, as well as places like Stop and Shop, Home Depot. I'm forgetting some of the others, but I think he is referenced, I believe he is referenced 20-something times in reports that he either wrote or that he was with another trooper when they went out and collected evidence and interviewed witnesses relevant to that surveillance evidence. But I'm representing that it's my belief, our belief, that he's limited to that. And I think that if you were to create a hierarchy of out of these 4 particular people that we've named, I think he's probably number 4 on the list. Kukowski is referenced and authored some reports that include being present when people were talked to, when there were searches done. So he's much more involved, and he's also making decisions about what to collect, what not to collect. And as for, and I'm trying to find my reference, yes, he's referred to specifically, and when I say that, he's authored close to 22 reports, or he's referenced in 22 reports during the early days of the investigation of the case. I'm going to mispronounce his name because I've done it so many times, but DeChico? DeChico. Well, I got close. DeChico is, he's right below Proctor when it comes to his involvement. He is referenced in at least 43 of these Mass State Police reports. He was I think he was present at the home of Mr. Walshe from almost day one, beginning January 5th or 6th. He's brought in and notifies people about the Cohasset investigation and the request to get involved. And thereafter, he's involved in collection of evidence, interviewing critical witnesses, tracking down witnesses, conducting searches. So he is right below Proctor, and he is signing off. The way I interpret a lot of the Mass State Police reports we've received and the grand jury testimony, he is signing off, so to speak, on a lot of the reports that are being submitted. That's the way I interpret it. So he's a very integral part of this investigation.
Michael, I already like this judge because she laid out very clearly, this is my reading of the law. This is what you have to show me. And defense, I'm going to ask you a specific question. Let's start with, what do these law enforcement officers have to do with this case specifically as it relates to Brian Walshe?
Yeah, so first she wants to know what their connection to the case is. Then the defense has a tough job here because they have to show what they were doing and then some specific reason for getting into other records, not the regular discovery. You're entitled to whatever they collected and notes and stuff like that, but they want internal affairs records. So they have to have some specific reason or some reason to believe that these guys did something wrong, not just the fact that they were collecting.
Which they might be guessing. We don't know because they don't have those records.